Hello everyone, my name is Reggie, I'm in the 11th grade, and today I'm going to be talking about Infinite Warfare's Zombie soundtrack. But before we start, we should get to know more about the game's background. Infinite Warfare was released on November 4th, 2016, created by Infinity Ward and published by Activision. The game's soundtrack has many different styles of music, since the game does take place in different eras, such as the 50s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Most of the soundtrack is made up of songs released during those time periods, but there were some songs specially made for the different maps. These 4 songs were composed by Sarah Schachner, a musician and composer for TV series and video games. Oh, and the game's genre is fictional and horror. It's now time for Fun Historical Facts. 4 days after the game was released was the US of A presidential election, with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as the candidates. A 6.2 earthquake happened in Italy, sadly killing 299 people.
That's not a fun fact. That's more of a sad fact.
Other content, such as Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered, Mario Party 3DS, and the PS4 Pro were also released around the same time of year. Actors for the game are Paul Reubens as Willard Wyler, Ike Barinholtz as AJ, Seth Green as Poindexter, Jay Farrow as Andre, and Sashir Zamata as Sally, along with David Hasselhoff, Kevin Smith, Pam Grier, and Cassandra Elvira Peterson playing themselves. And now, back to the video.
The first scene is set in the 1980s.
When glam metal was a thing. In this scene, there's an entire playlist of 80s hits that plays in the background. The synthesizer was an instrument that was used a lot in the 80s. It was in just about every song. There were also some drum beats, electric bass, electric guitar, and sometimes trumpets. After the 80s, the 90s came next, with hip-hop as the main deal. Here is also where the first custom song was made for the scene. The song is titled Puppet Strings. The song's style sounds like it was composed by a DJ, with some drums, guitar, and maybe an organ. Going back a couple of decades to the 1970s, where disco and heavy metal became a thing, there are less songs in the game's soundtrack, but there was also another specially made song called Cats on the Boulevard, which has a disco genre. You can hear some trumpets, electric guitar, and drums. Going back 2 more decades, there is now only one song as the soundtrack. This song is called The Brachyara Boogie, which has a rock and roll style of music, since the scene does take place in the 50s. Electric guitars, an organ, and drums can clearly be heard in this piece. The penultimate scene is similar to the previous one. It only has one song, Scattered Lies, which seems to only have 2 instruments that play in it, electric guitars and drums. Near the end of the game, in the final scene, is the final boss battle, which has some epic metal music in the background that plays while fighting Satan himself, known as Mephistopheles in the game. The instruments that can be heard in this piece are also electric guitars and drums. Here are some samples to listen to from each of the special songs made for the game, including Mephistopheles' theme.
A swell went up and came down with a crash. I looked to the shore, and at first glance, I saw the people had claws for hands. We're already on our way down. I thought I could save our
In this scene, Mephistopheles' theme definitely sounds like a final boss battle theme. due to its intensity and fast pace, especially since the battle includes the devil and skeletons chasing the player around on a floating island between space and time. The game's plot is about a director named Willard Wyler, who made a deal with the devil to give him the power to absorb people into his films in order to make them super realistic. After retirement and wanting to continue his career, he plans for a movie comeback, hiring young actors Poindexter Zitterman, Sally Simpson, Aaron A.J. Jordanules, and Andre Wright for the parts. As he makes the teen actors watch the first scene of his film, he goes to the projector room and performs a ritual, resulting in the actors being sucked into the film. The group find themselves fighting an infinite horde of the undead as they find pieces of a key through every film they jump through. Each film takes place in the order of the 80s, 90s, 70s, 50s, and a futuristic era. Halfway through their adventure, Willard starts rooting for them, hoping that they will defeat the devil and end the deal between them. After finding the final piece of the soul key and being freed from the film, Willard tries to congratulate them of their success, but the young actors, filled with rage, throw and lock Willard into the theater room in order to give him a taste of his own medicine. After the director was sucked into his film, the flow of the deal between him and the devil was interrupted, resulting in the group taking Willard's role in the deal. Not wanting to work for the devil, the group decides to fight him, and after defeating Satan, the group is transported back to the theater, and as they try to leave it, they realize that they are trapped in the soul jar, a jar full of souls trapped by Willard's cursed films, a jar that can only be opened from the outside with the soul key. The group is then surprised with the theater room doors being slammed open by Willard, who has escaped the film he was trapped in, informing the teens that they still have much to do.